Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by CuriosityStream. So, later this month, on March 24th actually, a book chronicling the complete production history of The Office is hitting the shelves. And as an Office fan, some of the quotes we're already getting from it are pretty interesting. That's got me thinking about the show again and rewatching some of my absolute favorite episodes. I've always thought those early seasons were just packed with classics, but maybe the show's best ongoing story arc didn't come until deep into season 5, with the Michael Scott Paper Company. If you've seen the show, and if you're watching this, I assume you have, you know that it was one of the biggest changes to the status quo the show ever made. Until it wasn't. In a way, I view it as one of the show's best moments and most bitter disappointments at the same time. So that's what I want to dig into this week. Why the Michael Scott Paper Company arc works, and why I think the show played its conclusion far too safe.
It all starts with an idea. But you can never tell where an idea will end up.
Okay, so for those who don't remember the details of a few 11-year-old sitcom episodes, the Michael Scott Paper Company arc follows Michael's attempt to build a Dunder Mifflin competitor after quitting. He starts a small and poorly planned company with just Pam and Ryan, eventually undercutting Dunder Mifflin's prices. It's a great setup, but it ends pretty quickly as the company is bought out by their old bosses just before they have to declare bankruptcy. To be clear, I'm not complaining about these episodes. I think they're pretty amazing actually, and give us an interesting new angle to explore Michael and especially Pam and Ryan in a way that hitting the usual beats in The Office just hadn't yet. I think it's a really successful story all the way around, but it also could have been a lot more than that. It could have been the move that gave The Office an entire second life and revitalized an aging show just as it was starting to get too repetitive. Most TV shows, especially network shows, revolve around a pretty unchanging status quo. Characters can change, but not enough to be unrecognizable to viewers who have missed a few episodes or even a few seasons. And the same usually goes for settings. There was never going to be a season of Cheers where Sam sold the bar and suddenly everyone is hanging out in his apartment. Just like there was never going to be a season of The X-Files where Mulder and Scully decide to start a food truck and drop the whole, alien thing. Now, that's obvious, but I still think there's a lot that a show can do to freshen up its own premise. And the Michael Scott Paper Company was The Office's best shot at that. It was an amazing move because it allowed the show to keep its core premise, people working in an office and selling paper, but replaced all the context around it with something new, different, and pretty interesting. For 5 seasons, viewers had mostly been used to seeing Dunder Mifflin as a bumbling, ineffective corporate overlord. Maybe not an evil company so much as just a boring and dying one. The show had done a great job of painting that picture, as well as Michael's loyalty to it. But if the Michael Scott Paper Company had stuck around, we would be seeing them from a very, very different angle. The Goliath to our character's David. It was really fun seeing Jim having to be on Team Dunder Mifflin while also trying to help out Michael and Pam. And Dwight, of course, doing almost the exact opposite. If the show had stuck to its guns, we could have really seen this happen to the whole office, as some come over and join the new team and others stay behind, all in the same building. It would have given the show an entirely new source of tension and new ways to generate stories for these characters. And that's something that only gets harder as a sitcom ages. And if sticking with the Michael Scott Paper Company seems a little too out there for you, I will say there's one show I can think of that pulled off a similar move, and did it really well. It's a show that started on the same network as The Office too, NBC's football drama Friday Night Lights. While the first 3 seasons of the show are about the Dillon Panthers, as we cheer them on and follow many of their players. In the last 2 seasons, though, the main character, Coach Eric Taylor, is fired, and we follow him over to the new underdog team, the East Dillon Lions. It was a great idea, and it made us see the Panthers in a totally different light. The team that we spent seasons cheering for now became the hated rivals, juggernauts bent on taking down our underdog team. And this allowed the show to get a few more really good seasons out of a pretty simple premise. The Office could have done the same. Instead of fumbling around, constantly trying to find a way to make Dunder Mifflin feel fresh and different with new owners, they could have positioned them in a new light without having to bring in new bosses over and over again for the next few seasons. It was exactly the bold move that they needed, and they pulled it off really well. But for one reason or another, they backed off just when things were about to get really interesting. So what would The Office have looked like if the Michael Scott Paper Company had stuck around? I'm not going to claim to know, but it is really fun to think about the possibilities. One thing I would have really loved to see is how the cast would have reacted to getting to make the Office rules. Where would, say, Pam have tried to be different from Dunder Mifflin, and what would happen if they tossed a lot of those rules out the window? The early seasons of the show, and especially the first two, were about people having to deal with the drudgery and small indignities of working in a modern office, just trying to grab on to a little hope or meaning where they could. But by the later seasons, the characters had become more friendly with each other and a lot more cartoonish. Now, I'm not saying this is a totally bad thing. It is what usually happens to long-running sitcoms. But instead of letting it stagnate, watching the same characters go through nearly identical beats, we could have seen a real evolution of the show that still had the same premise. And I think that's one of the best things an aging sitcom could do. It would have been really funny to see Michael try to run the large, family-type company he always wanted. The episodes we have give us a decent idea of what he'd be like as a boss with completely free reign. But it would have been great to see that on an even bigger scale. It also would be a great way to introduce new characters, as the cast could expand to include new hires at the new company. And while there was probably no way Idris Elba was ever going to stick around long term, I'd have loved to see an arc where Dwight takes over Dunder Mifflin Scranton, hellbent on taking down his former boss and new competitor. To me, one of the best episodes of the last two seasons was the one that focused on Dwight as a dictator-like boss, and I think that would have worked even better here. It would have given a really good reason for a few more of the gang like Kevin, Creed, and Andy to switch sides and join Michael. And look, I realize this is basically just fanfic at this point, like what I would have liked to have seen, but when you have a storyline with as much potential as this one, that just feels natural. The Michael Scott Paper Company could have been a story-generating machine, just when the show needed one the most. I'm not going to say that all the episodes after it were bad or anything. I definitely don't think that's true. While I think Season 6 is a dip in quality, I really do love the way they handled Michael's exit in Season 7. But when it comes to later day Office, I'll never not be able to think about these episodes and what could have been. It's a door that we'll never get to see opened. A road they could have gone down but didn't. I'll always love The Office, but a part of me wonders if I would have liked it even more if the show just decided to take a few more risks.
Scar! We've searched the whole building, Golden Face. Where is the bomb? We've searched the whole building.
But at the end of the day, at least these episodes gave us Ryan working at a bowling alley and Michael pitching his own grandma for investor money. That's definitely not nothing. Now, these episodes are really worth a rewatch, but once you finish that, why not check out some great documentaries?
Last week, I watched Man's Best Friend, a documentary about the evolution of dogs and how they were domesticated. Whether you care about the science or just want to see some puppies, you'll probably enjoy this one. It's a really well-made documentary. That's just the tip of the iceberg on CuriosityStream, a streaming service from the founder of the Discovery Channel, where you'll find all kinds of documentaries. And if you sign up, you'll also be getting Nebula, a new streaming service featuring tons of YouTubers you probably already know, from Lindsay Ellis to Patrick H. Willems and me. Get access to all of that for only $19.99 for the entire year by going to curiositystream.com/captainmidnight.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes, too.